Hey guys, welcome to Recraft Relic channel, and I hope you guys are doing well. So today we are going to basically talk about how to write your own use reducer, and in the process also learn how the React custom hooks work. So I also have written an article. Before starting the video, I'll want you guys to just go through that if that is much more helpful for you. So if you don't want to follow the video, here is an article which basically I'm going to do today. So I'm going to link this in the description, and yeah, so let's get started. Yeah, so basically in today's video, what we are going to do, we want to learn about custom hooks, and what we are going to do, we're going to decipher the use reducer hook and reverse engineer it, and then create our own use reducer, and and in the process also learn about how well the custom hooks work basically. So yeah, let's just get started. So here you can see I have a simple application which basically track the count. Whenever you click on the increment, when you click on the increment, it will increment the value. When you will click on the decrement, it will decrement the value. And yeah, so you can see the count getting up and down. And right now it use reducer. So if you are not familiar with use reducer is basically a reducer like hook that React provides. So there are in order to save a state in reducer, what basically we do is if not the reducer, but if in your application you want to save state, what you use state, right? So for example, if I want to save state, so I'm going to like count, I'm going to do something like this: set count and use state, and give it an initial state, and whenever I want to update, I can just call set count and all that, right? But what if your state is much more complex? Because if you have watched my previous video, we know that use state always replace the previous value. So for example, if you want to save objects array, where you only want to modify like their children's, use state is not that much helpful because it overwrite the whole variable basically. So in order to solve that, React introduced use reducer, and inside use reducer you can use a reducer like flow, and then you can basically save complex data structures. For example, an object. For example, here you can see we have an object where we are updating the count, adding it or subtracting it. So right now we are basically managing an object, and useReducer lets us do that by using a reducer, basically as you will use with a as you use with the Redux basically. So here you can see what we are doing. Basically it's same as how you will work with Redux. So you have a reducer where it will take the previous state and then it will take the action. According to the action, it will modify the state. So for example, our initial state is count 0, right? When we click on the increment, so let me do it. So the initial count is 0, initial state is 0. What we are doing, we are dispatching type increment, and this is an action. Basically this thing, it's an action. That action is going inside here, and this is the initial state basically for the first time. The action goes here, and then it says, you know what, this is an increment, right? And because it is an increment, I'm going to increment the value and return it. Whenever this value is updated, basically it goes inside this state, and the state count is we are displaying the state count here. So for example, if I click on the plus, because it was an increment, it incremented the value. Same goes for decrement. When we are dispatching the type decrement, dispatching an action with the type decrement, the action goes here, but now the state is count 1 because it always take the previous state. So now you can modify the previous state to be like, because the action type is decrement, it's going to minus it and return it. Again we are showing the state count. If I click on minus, it's going to basically minus it. So this is simple, simple as it gets, right? So but in order to make everything work, we have useReducer, which is provided by React. So today we are going to write our own useReducer, right? So in order to do that, let's first understand what useReducer takes in and what it outputs basically. So useReducer takes two things. First is reducer, the function which is responsible for updating the state according to the action, and the initial state. So what is the initial state of the current state? For example, the count at the start will be 0, name at the start will be something, or stuff like that. Then there is another third argument which I'm not going to talk about in this video. I think it's a very advanced case, and I don't think we have the domain to cover that in this video. So we'll stick with these two. So useReducer take one reducer which is responsible for updating the state using an action, and then the initial state, basically what is the initial state of our current state. Then it outputs two things. So one is state is the current state of the application. If you're incrementing it, decrementing it, if you're updating the state, what is the current state? Whenever the state is updated, this will get renewed, and the re-render will happen and we'll have the value here. The second thing is a dispatch function, dispatch method. What dispatch function do basically is it takes an action, and according to that it basically tells that we need to run the reducer and get a new value, and return that into the component. So dispatch is for dispatching action. So what basically happen is dispatch takes in an action, you can see here, and that action will then be transported to the reducer, and reducer will return whatever value whatever value it gets after the modification according to the action, and then it just get returned here. So simple at that. So this is the simple flow. Basically you'll call dispatch will take the action, pass it to the reducer will return the state, that will get saved inside the useReducer, and then it will be returned to us in the component basically. So that's how it flows. And then again the same cycle, dispatch, reducer, state, component, same. So now we'll just comment it out, and yeah, so let's comment this out for now, and let's remove this because we don't need this useReducer now because we're going to write our own. So yeah, so it's going to throw an error. That's fine. Let's uncomment this. So let's define useReducer. Okay, so if you know a bit about custom hooks, what basically custom hooks do is they allow you to reuse functionality. I think I'll link the previous video that I did on hooks in the description. You can go and check it out if you don't know about the custom hooks. But yeah, so basically custom hooks are to give a very small overview. Custom hooks are designed to reuse functionality between components. So for now, what we will do, we will create our own useReducer, and then we can reuse it in any kind of component, in multiple components. The other important thing is that always the custom hook start with use, and that's how even the custom or any kind of hook start with prefixed with use, because that's how React detect and basically differentiate them from a normal function. So we're going to type useReducer here. As we may know, useReducer takes two arguments. So first is the reducer, the second is the initial state of the of the component, and it returns an array. You can see that it returns an array like useState, and we are just destructuring it here. So first element is the state, the second element is the dispatch. All right. So now what we are going to do is, you know, we're going to we have to return the state. So for now, just return the initial state, and then also return a dispatch function. For right now, let's just make it a dummy function, and let's get thing working. So we just return whatever state we get, and a dummy initial function. Let's see if it works. So as you can see, it is not working, because right now we always return the initial state. So for example, if the initial state is 1 here, it will be 1, because the initial state was 1. So now let's see if it is taking the action or not. So I'm going to define the action and I will console that here, the action. All right, let's see if the dispatch is getting called or not. If I click on plus, you can see the type increment. If I click on minus, you can see the type decrement, right? So this function at least get called when we are dispatching, when we are calling the dispatch, because this is the same function, because we return it from here. So now what we are going to do is, so let's recap a bit. So what dispatch do is that it takes an action and then pass it to the reducer, and then reducer update the state and then returns it. So in order to update the state, we have to keep it somewhere inside our component. All right. So the other thing is that reducer always take in the previous value, right? So we have to save the state somewhere so we can pass it in the next cycle. For example, if I'm clicking plus for the first time, it will take the reducer will take the initial state count 0. But if I keep clicking it on the second round, it will take the state count as 1, because that was the previous value. That was the previous value that the reducer returned. So for example, to simplify, if reducer get called first time, the state will be count so state will be count 1, not 1, 0, right? Right, it will be 0, right? Then if once it get called, the next time it should be count 1, because it's going to increment to the previous value, right? So in order to solve that, we have to keep the state somewhere, right? So what we will do is basically we'll have a variable state, and whenever reducer is getting called, we will take the reducer value and update it in the state, and as well return it, so that the component can use it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to define a variable state, but we have to save it across renders. So if you want to save it across renders, we have to use state, right? So what I am set state here, use state, and now what use state takes the initial value, right? So what should be the initial value in the first render, right? It should be this, right, which is passed to our useReducer function. So I'm just, for clarification, I'm just going to call it init state, so it doesn't interfere with these two variables here. Okay, so I'm going to just go here and do this. So now what is happening? Use state is not defined, initial state is not defined. All right. So use state is not defined, so I'm going to import it from here, right? And now this is init state. But what I'm going to do, instead of returning the initial state every time, I'm going to return the state which I'm saving, which is saved across renders. By across render, I mean is that if the count is 0 for the first render, it will show 0, but if it get updated, it will show the updated value. All right. So now we have the state, so we can always save the previous state and pass it to the reducer again, so it can do its thing. and we also have the dispatch function, which we have the dispatch function, but it's not working right now. So let's define this dispatch function. All right, let's go here and define the dispatch function. I'll go here. So how it should be. So let's define the dispatch function here. So we know that it takes an action, right? We know that it's going to take an action. So what I'm going to do is an action here, right? What I'm doing, okay, so action here, right? Now let's recap how it works. So dispatch takes in an action and it calls the reducer, right? So let's call the reducer. We have the reducer. So this reducer, if you break it down, it's just a function which takes the previous value, right? So what I'm going to do is this reducer, it takes the previous value, which is the state, right? So whenever we update, so for the first time it will count 0, but the second time it will count 1, count 2, count 3, count 4, count 5, right? So whatever the updated value, whenever the dispatch is called, it will always get the previous updated value inside the reducer. Then we have to pass it the action which is passed to dispatch here, which is here. So I'm going to pass it here, and then I'll console the value here, console.log the value here, and let's see what happens. If I click on plus, you can see the count 1. You can see it is working, right? You can see it here, it is working. But if I click again, it will always always show count 1. Why? Because we are not updating the state, right? But let's break it down a bit. So why it shows count 1? If I click on -1, it's like minus, it will show -1. Why? How it's working? So what we are basically doing is, in simple terms, reducer is a function which takes state and action, right? According to the action, it updates the state and returns it. So right now, let's see what is the state. So at the first time the count is 0, so the state goes in count 0 and the action is increment. It goes here, the state is count 0, action goes in here, and because the action was increment, the count state.count, which was 0 plus 1 gets returned, which is happening here. Whenever I will click on plus, because the count was 0, it will plus 1 and return the state, and I'm then consoling it. Same goes for decrement. The state is count 0, action is decrement, it minus the value and returns it. That's why we get the -1. But our problem is that we want to keep updating the value, right? And we are updating the value according to the previous value. So previous value need to be updated, right? So what we are going to do basically here is this. So we know that reducer returns the updated value. So what we are going to do is we're going to do this: const new state is equals to reducer state action. So now when the count is 0, the reduce and we increment the value, it will return count 1, and that will be saved inside the new state. And then what we are going to do, we are going to say update the state like this. So now update the state. So now what is happening here is that when the count is 0, we are calling the reducer with the action increment. Now the count is 1. That state, the count 1 state, will be saved inside the state, the variable that we are using to store state. And now the state is count 1, and that is returned to the component. And that's why we are able to, that's how the count will be updated. In the next run, because the state is 1 now and the action is increment again, it will output count equal to 2. and then it will be saved, and then so forth, and it will go in a loop basically. So let's see if that works. If our user reducer work, if I click on plus, while it gives me 1 2 3 4 5 6, and if I do minus, it will keep keep minusing the value. And that's pretty much it. That's how easy to implement use reducer. If you want to implement it in your own terms, you just have to understand the basic of how the custom hooks work, and the anatomy of how reducers work, right? So let's before ending the video, let's try something a bit complex, so to prove the point. So I'll go here and I'll say user and set user, right? By the way, you can use as many as hooks you want in a component. So yeah, I mean, it will work the same way. The user reducer and the initial user. So let's go and let's define an initial user, right? And initial user, and here it will take the state, the action, and it will say update. Let's do update age and update name. Okay, what it's going to do, it's going, because state is the whole reducer, right? So what it's going to do, and let's also define our initial user, right? Initial user use, it will be an object, name will be Manoj, age will be 23, right? Let's make it simple, and also let's have a profession here, which is JavaScript developer. Identifier has already been declared. So it should be user reducer, right? So this is user reducer, and that is the initial, right? And now what we are going to do, I'm going to introduce 2 new buttons here, right? And also the name basically. So name will be user dot name, and then age will be user dot age. Okay, user dot age here, and this will be it will dispatch update at age, and you can also pass a payload. So let's pass payload, or you can just say age, right? And I'll say 25, and then I'll go here and I'll say update name, and I'll say name equal to Manoj Singh Negi, right? Yeah, and in this reducer, what we are going to do, when there is update age, we are going to do action dot payload action dot age, or here we are going to do instead of age, I was going to do name and action dot name, and after that, before that, we are going to destructure the whole state. So I'll explain in a bit why I'm doing this. So why I'm doing is this, because the state will be our user. In case when we are updating age, it should retain the name. That's why we are combining the both things. And same goes for here. When we are updating name, it should retain the name, so retain the age basically. So that's why I'm doing it here. So let's see, name Manoj, age 23, click on this. We got error. Let's see why. Cannot read count of undefined app.jst.count. Why that's happening. Yeah, because this shouldn't be a dispatch, because I'm calling the dispatch, and dispatch function is related to this reducer. So that is why I'm getting, you can call it whatever you want, but right now because there is already a dispatch, so I'm calling it as a set user basically. So let's go here. Let's see, age 25, name Manu Singh. Yeah. So you can pass anything here, and because it's a simple object, and then you can just use it here and update the value. So this is pretty much it, guys, because this is useReducer, written from scratch. Just let's just at at the last time, let me walk you through again, through all of this. So let's look at useReducer basically. So what useReducer do is it takes a reducer which take the previous state and the action, and according to the action it returns a new state. So you can memorize the reducer like something like this. It takes previous state reducer and it outputs new state basically. Previous state, right? Previous state, and it outputs a new state according to the action, right? And also the initial state, which will be the initial state of the component. Then whenever you dispatch a function, dispatch takes in an action and calls the reducer with the previous state and the action. Whatever is the new state, it stores it in the state and returns it basically, right? So that it can be used by our component. And as you can see, I can use multiple instances of it in a single component, and if you want to use it in two different components, you can also do that. The main benefit of useReducer, it works the same way as the use state, but the only benefit of it is more flexibility while you're working with complex states. So yeah, guys, that's pretty much it for today. And yeah, till the next Saturday, I'll just say, stay tuned for the next Saturday, and I will be doing the live stream again. So yeah, I think that is it for today. Yeah.